Hey everybody, welcome to Pack Talk Podcast number 65. We're here with Mr. Eric downtown at the Battery. We got some background noises behind us you might hear, but Mr. Eric is a history specialist in everything history-wise, but today we're talking about piracy and ghosts in Charleston.
Oh, yeah.
So, Mr. Eric, thanks for joining us.
I appreciate the offer. Thank you very much for having me out. I really appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Is there any way you could start off by just giving us a quick background on yourself, how you got to where you are today?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I've grown up in South Carolina. I've been around all my life in these parts, and when I graduated college in 1977, I had a degree in psychology.
Okay.
And I always kid kids because our other company is a balloon art business. We twist up, make balloons for kids, and
okay.
And sometimes when I'm talking to kids, I'll remind them they need to get an education. And I said, stay in school. In fact, you can go to college, and go ahead and get you a degree in psychology. And one day you can dress up like a pirate or make balloon animals for kids. But seriously, I spent 20 years working for the state of South Carolina. I was a probation officer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and did that for quite a while, and got out of that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And decided I wanted to do something that was a little less troublesome. Yeah. And something a little more fun.
Yeah.
And I bounced around, did some outside sales and radio and some insurance work, and even dabbled with timeshare sales. But
okay.
But then I became a tour guide. 2007. My friend who runs and owns the company Bulldog Tours, which I still work with them some part-time,
okay.
John Laverne hired me as a tour guide and got me set up with training, and I took all the tests and became a licensed tour guide. And I've maintained that license. Now it's certified. You don't have to be licensed anymore. They call it certified. And there was some people that, long story short, they sued the federal government because they couldn't pass a test, I guess, and they decided that it was infringing on their freedom of speech not to be able to give a tour. So the federal government threw out the test. And so now if you can fog a mirror, you can become a tour guide in Charleston. But I do recommend you do a little reading before you start, because otherwise there's no telling what you may come up with to tell people. But then we started this company, Charleston Pirate Tours, back in earnest in 2010.
Okay.
And we've been very, very happy with it. We've had some success, and it's very humbling that people will, actually buy a ticket to let me walk around and talk to them. I find that so humbling. I don't care if it's 1 or it's 20.
Yeah.
I never take them for granted because there's so many things you can do in Charleston. I mean, like I tell people, there's 985 things you could do in Charleston. And so go do those. If you want to do me, that's great. Do a tour with me, that's great. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they do that is very humbling. But I saw that there was a little bit of a need for more of Charleston's pirate history to be spoken of, and I'd heard what people had said, and I'm just, I'm a real fanatic about accuracy. Mm. So I started doing a little bit of research. A guy had asked me, because he knew I was a tour guide, I was doing ghost tours and little history stuff, and he had some friends come into town and said, could you do a pirate tour for my friends? And I said, well, let me do a little research. I mean, I was already dressing up like a pirate because of the balloon business. I was doing pirate birthday parties for kids, so I already had the outfit. Yeah. So I started doing a little material digging and found about an hour and 20 minutes worth of stuff to talk about. Yeah. Well, then I got fascinated with it, and the more I started researching, I just started finding more and more information. And now I got a 3-ring binder about this thick, filled with primary documents from the National Archives in England, Jamaica, Nassau, North Carolina, South Carolina. Wow. And the bottom line is now if I tried to give a tour and tell everybody every little nugget I've dug up about Charleston's pirate history and the history of piracy in South Carolina in general, well, I'd probably keep them out here and they'd miss a few meals. Yeah. And I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So it's just 2 hours long. So don't get excited. Don't get worried, folks. It's only 2 hours long, okay? Unless you ask questions, and then we may stretch it a bit. But that's basically it.
Well, how'd you start compiling all that info? Did you travel around to these cities, or you were able to get it on the phone?
All of it has been done. The beauty of the internet is you can find anything, right? Even bad information. Mm-hmm. But I only use primary documents and books, I might add. I've got some good books that are written by people that I'm friends with now that have written some of these books. But I know the authors and I know their research. Yep. And the bottom line is they are footnoted.
Yeah.
And many of the footnotes are some of the very same documents that I had already retrieved from these archives.
Yeah.
So I know the information is spot on.
Yeah.
And I'll use some of their information because they may have found a nugget that I hadn't found before.
Right.
And so that's kind of how that came about. I never travel. I mean, I'd love to, but I don't have time. I'm working all the time. I mean, I think, well, I'm going to take a day off, and then somebody says, well, can you possibly do a tour? We're only in town for one day. I say, yeah okay. But it's what I do. I mean, it's what I do. So,
yes,
but anyway, that's kind of how it all came about.
Okay.
Now, one of these days, I do want to go to some of the places that I talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would love to go physically to the archives in Jamaica, where all this stuff has been kept that I've used.
Yeah.
I've got trial transcripts of a lot of pirates that were executed in Jamaica. And when I first started getting some of this information, I actually contacted the Minister of Archives down in Jamaica. I found him. I found a telephone number, and I called this guy.
Yeah.
And I told him what I was looking for. I was looking for the transcript of a few trials. And I said, do you have any of the Vice Admiralty Court trial transcripts? Oh, yes, Mom. We have them by plenty. They're in boxes. Come and look all you wish.
Wow.
What am I supposed to do? Get in my van, just drive over there? I wanted to give the guy an Amazon gift card for $100 and let him pull them for me and just email them to me. But it didn't work. But anyway, I was able to find them with the help of friends as well.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people that have taken my tours are also historians, and they've been kind enough to send me stuff.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff they have sent me has just been fabulous. I mean, it really has been, and it's been a tremendous asset to what I'm doing.
Yes, sir. Have you ever thought about putting together your own book, or maybe you're working on it?
Well, I'm working on a couple right now.
Okay.
One book I started working on, years ago, on a pirate that we actually dealt with. He was parked right out there off what they used to call the Pumpkin Hill Channel, which is sort of between Folly Beach and Morris Island.
Okay.
His name was Charles Vane. And I started working on a book on him, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, I got enough information together, and there was a lot of people interested in it, and they wanted me to do a lecture. So I did a lecture on Vane in this PowerPoint presentation on some of my early research on him to a group of people at the Old Exchange. But the biggest thing I needed was his trial transcript. Well, now I finally have it.
Oh, wow.
And so I've got his trial transcript, which is a huge help.
Yeah.
And so I've got that piece of the puzzle now. So now it's just a matter of me sitting down and compiling all the information. But he's a hard guy to come up with information on, because the first time we actually hear about this guy is on Christmas Eve off of Key Biscayne, Florida. And he was the quartermaster on a ship run by a guy named Henry Jennings. He was his quartermaster. And that's the first time he shows up in history. It doesn't even really indicate in any records how old he was at that point. He could have been 18. He could have been 25. I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's no way for me to know. And I tell people this all the time, that trying to really find accurate, real, documented pirate history is sort of like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. It ain't easy. And so you just can't go out and buy a book and use a book and put a tour together.
Right.
It's just, you just can't do it. I mean, you could, but I don't know how good it would be.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Black Sails.
Yeah.
I forgot what program it was on, but Charles Vane was one of the characters in there. Was that accurate depiction of him?
He was it was fair. They did a few things that were sort of off.
Yeah.
Well, I had one of the directors on my tour one time. I gave him a private tour.
Nice.
He had never been to Charleston before, and when the show went off the air, he came to Charleston to actually see the place.
They had that whole scene in Charleston.
Yeah, I think he was the director on most of the scenes they did about Charleston.
Okay.
When they didn't try to blow Charleston off the map.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, that just didn't happen. But of course, they depicted having Charles Vane executed in the town square in Nassau. Well, he was actually executed in Jamaica on the 29th of March of 1721.
Wow.
And so we had some laughs.
Yeah.
He said, well, you got to do what you got to do. And I said, well, I'm not trying to, to bust you on anything. I said, it's just, I just enjoyed it. And I said, I really enjoyed your series. And but I have seen it, and he was a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I've got a picture of him on my Facebook page somewhere.
Nice. Yeah.
Where I got me to take a quick picture with him. So he was a nice guy.
Yes, sir. Well, backing it up as far as the piracy, how did that all start for Charleston? What are some of the major key players?
All right, well, I'll put it to you this way. and I've said this many times, and I'll say it till the day I'm dead, if it hadn't been for pirates very early in our history, I'm not even sure that South Carolina would have survived.
Wow.
And the reason I say this is simply because when South Carolina started, it's not a royal colony.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's 8 drinking buddies in England that owned the place.
Mm-hmm.
They looked after the interest of King Charles II when he exiled himself in France because his father, Charles I, was executed.
Mm.
He had his head cut off in 1649.
Yeah.
They whacked his head off. Well, Charles II was his son. He was next in line for the throne and next in line to find his head next to Daddy's in a basket. So instead of all of that, he hid in France for 11 years.
Okay.
It was 1660 when he was finally brought back to England, and those 8 men were instrumental in getting him back on the throne.
Mm.
Well, because of this, he was very happy for their help, so he said, y'all can have some land.
Yeah.
So he gave them the land that became known as Carolina.
Hmm.
And so in 1663, when they got the land, of course, coming up from Barbados was William Hilton, and he came up here to explore the coastline.
Mm-hmm.
He was the guy that Hilton had islands named after.
Okay.
Okay, so they determined that this area would be absolutely ideal for the colony. So the first ships come over. Well, actually, the first ship arrived in 1670, April of 1670, named Carolina. And there were 3 ships that left England, the Port Royal, the Albemarle, and the Carolina. When they went to Barbados to get a load of people.
Okay.
And so they go down there to get a load of people,
Mm-hmm.
but 2 of the ships, the Albemarle and Port Royal, were damaged in a hurricane or a major storm. I don't know if it was a hurricane at that point because it really wasn't hurricane season.
Yeah.
But they were damaged in a major storm, and the only ship that made the next leg up here was the Carolina.
Oh, so they were stuck down there. They did make it down there.
Yeah,
Okay,
they made it to Barbados.
Yeah.
Now, but they eventually did make it here.
Okay.
They did eventually make it here. And but it was pretty tough sledding. I mean, you have to imagine when these people arrived at Albemarle Point, which is the name of the first town, which was up the Ashley River just a ways, they didn't step off the ship, and Daddy didn't tell Mama, go set a tent up, I'll go to Walmart and pick up a few things. I mean, there was nothing here.
Right.
So it was tough sledding.
Yeah.
Well, eventually by 1680, they relocated down here to the peninsula, what they referred to back then as Oyster Point. So when they arrived here, they got down here to the peninsula, the town starts to grow. In 1683 is when I find the first mention of pirates showing up here. Now, Charleston was sort of like what you might call today colonial Las Vegas. I mean, there wasn't a street out here that didn't have a couple of taverns on it or a couple of brothels, and sometimes they're under the same roof.
Okay.
And so these pirates came into town here to have them a rip-roaring hot good time.
Oh, that's why they would come.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And these pirates were coming into town with their pockets stuffed with money. I mean, an average pirate would walk in this town with anywhere from 500 to 1,000 English pounds in their pocket.
Wow.
Now, 1,000 English pounds is basically what a man would earn if he worked on a merchant ship back then for 20 years.
Dang.
So they were coming into town. They got the ships loaded down with all this stuff. Frankly, it was all stolen. These people didn't care.
Yeah.
They're happy to get their hands on this stuff. And so they're doing all this business with pirates, back and forth with these pirates. Well, you're not going to build a very successful economy if your whole economy is based on thieves and smugglers.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have something more substantial. Plus, you have to remember the 8 men that own this place, they're not here. They're in England and getting no return on their investment here. So they had to come up with something. So they got it. Now, there's several versions of how this actually happened. This is my favorite. A pirate ship showed up off of Sullivan's Island in 1693. There's a man that lives here in town named Thomas Smith. Now, Thomas Smith lived right up the street here near the intersection of East Bay and Longitude Lane. And he was known to dabble around with some of these pirates. He was even one of our governors at one point. He's the wealthiest man in South Carolina. In addition to that nice house, he's got 45,000 acres out in the country.
Nice.
He's what they called a landgrave.
Okay.
Well, he went out to see his buddies on the pirate ship, and they needed a bit of work done to their ship. Now, we know this is a very common thing for pirate ships to use this to come back as a base of operation to get refitted and recrewed and head back to their other base of operation, which was St. Maria Island off of Madagascar. And they would run up the east coast and attacking the Muslim ships coming and going out of the Red Sea and into the Indian Ocean. Those ships carried all this valuable cargo. They carried gold, silver, gems, jewels, all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then they bring some of that spoils back this way.
Yeah.
Well, we know this ship had been to Madagascar because of some of the cargo it had. But one particular item they had on the ship Thomas Smith is getting them some lumber to fix the ship. And they gave him a nice gift off the ship in exchange, a big bag of rice seed from Madagascar.
Wow.
So he took this rice seed back over here to his house.
Yeah.
He got in touch with his buddies and gave it out to them. Said, all y'all plant this in your yards, and I'm going to plant some in my yard, and let's see what happens. It flourished.
No way. This is how rice started in South Carolina.
That's how it started.
What? That's crazy.
So now, 7 years later, July 1, 1700, I had the transcript of a memo at home that was published by the Governor's Council. And this memo is bragging about how in the first 6 months of 1700, they've now successfully shipped 300 tons of rice back to England and 30 tons to the Caribbean. They're averaging between 600 and 800 tons of rice a year going out of South Carolina now. And that rice crop is what turned Charleston into the third largest city in America. Charleston, the third largest city and fourth largest city in America, and South Carolina became the wealthiest colony in America
because of pirates.
Because of pirates bringing some rice and giving it to Thomas Smith, who lived down the street here.
That's crazy.
The only cities bigger than Charleston were New York, Boston, and Philadelphia.
Okay.
The wealthiest people in the country are living here now, and you know what they don't really care to have anymore?
Pirates.
A bunch of wild, half-drunk, crazy, wild-eyed pirates running around. That's when they started hanging them in 1700. Right down over at the end of this park and right up along the edge of what is today East Battery Street, up to about Water Street, that point, that's where they used to hang them.
Really?
Yep.
Was Thomas Smith involved in that?
No.
No? That was after his time?
No. Well, no, he didn't. He didn't want to see them hang.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't hang the ones he dealt with.
Yeah.
They just wanted to make a point because they didn't want all these pirates hanging around. So that's when they decided to just hang 8 of them just to make a point.
I got you.
And so that is why piracy literally made this place what it is.
Yeah. Quick question for you. You know how you said the pirates would come, it'd be like a second base of operations. They would refit, they would go into town and enjoy the spoils of town and all that. Would any of the ships coming to or from Charleston, were they harassing them at that time, or
not really, not that much that I can see that I have a record of?
Because those ships are connected to a port they enjoy.
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean they were still out. You know, the spoils were still out there, and they would still take them, and they could have been coming to Charleston for all we know.
Right.
There's no way to prove one way or the other that those ships weren't bound for here at that point. Now, I do have a news story at home that was in the London Gazette newspaper that appeared, I want to say it was the 25th of February in 1722. And this is a news story that just lists all the ships that were taken by pirates coming and going from South Carolina between 1717 and 1721. It lists the name of the ship, the captain of the ship, and the name of the pirates that took the ship.
Wow.
And I always put an asterisk by this. These are the ones they have a record of. It doesn't count the ones they don't have a record of. But 36 ships were taken by pirates coming and going out of South Carolina between 1717 and 1721.
Okay. Now, whenever they started hanging the pirates out here to make a statement, is that when it kind of turned? Well,
it actually, not so much at that point. You see, what really caused piracy to explode was the conclusion of the War of Spanish Succession. Queen Anne's War, as it's commonly referred to as, started in 1702 when Queen Anne went to war with France and Spain. Now, when war would break out back then, navies were very small. If you wanted a big navy, you're going to either have to hire men, build out a bunch of extra ships just to fight a war. That is expensive. So they had the authority back then. In fact, it's in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. This could actually be done today if it was necessary. When war is declared, a king, a queen, or in our case, the president, can give a civilian ship a document that's referred to as a letter of marque. Now, a letter of marque is a legal document when given to the captain of a civilian ship. When they get this legal document, they then can go out and attack, raid, pillage, and plunder all they want, as long as it's an enemy ship.
Oh, wow.
That's the caveat.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately for a guy we know as Captain Kidd, William Kidd, he had a letter of marque, but unfortunately he crossed the line one too many times and went over and dabbled into the pirate side when he was supposedly a privateer. So that's why they ended up hanging him on the Wapping dock of the River Thames in England and left his body strung up for close to 2 years. But anyway, back to where we're going.
Yeah.
So in 1702, they started handing out letters of marque when the war was declared. It's estimated that Queen Anne gave out approximately 1,600 of those.
Wow.
Now, these
That's
ships
crazy.
could go out and commit every act of piracy they wanted as long as it was an enemy ship.
Yeah.
And they could keep what they stole off the enemy ships and bring it back to places like Charleston and sell it off and trade with the local people with it. In fact, as a side note, one of the most successful privateers during the War of 1812 was owned by a Charleston family. The name of the ship was the Saucy Jack. And it was one of the most successful privateers during the War of 1812. In fact, my favorite story of the Saucy Jack, and then we'll get back to real pirates here, was when they attacked and captured a ship named Pelham.
Okay.
And as they're bringing it into port, the Pelham was a well decked out ship. I mean, it had all these beautiful accoutrements on it. It was fancy up, fancy this, and all kind of really adorned, if you will, festooned, I guess you might say. They had a pipe organ on the ship. So the captain of the Saucy Jack brought the pipe organ up to the deck, and they were playing the pipe organ as they brought the ship into port as a spoil.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a true story. I've got the newspaper article where it was brought into town at home. That's in my stuff. But it's just one of those side notes I'll throw in there for you. But anyway, so when the war ended in 1713, there's literally thousands of men who had crewed these privateers who are no longer able to continue on legally. So most of them just took down the country's flag they were sailing under and put up flags of their own. They were black ones and red ones with skeletons and skulls and crossbones and daggers and all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Piracy exploded after that war ended.
Oh, yeah.
By 1718, if you were a merchant captain sailing out of the Charleston harbor, you better have your head on a swivel, because there are pirate ships just sitting all out through here just waiting on a chance, because they weren't stupid. They knew this is the wealthiest place in the country.
Oh, yeah.
They're sitting out there just laying in the cut waiting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And going back to how, during the war they were allowed to do this legally.
Yeah.
Who would want to go back to
they were making a
not
killing.
Making so much money.
Yeah, they were making a fortune
having
out
a good
there.
time and all that,
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how it all started really getting really, really bad.
So that was when the age of the pirate really just blew up.
1713 to 1721. Those 7 years of history. Those 7 years. Out of over 1,000 years of pirate history, those 7 years have given us all the books on pirates, all the movies on pirates, all the TV shows about pirates, a ride down at Disney, a video game, and an opera.
Yeah.
7 years of history.
Wow, that's insane. So what are some of the major players that kind of arose in that era that were operating in this area?
Okay, I'll just rattle off a list. You had Stede Bonnet, Charles Vane, Charles Yates, John Rackham, Christopher Moody, George Lowther, Ed Lowe, Richard Worley, Israel Hands, David Harriet, Captain Richards, Blackbeard. That's just to name a few. And that was basically 1717 to 1721.
That's crazy. Were they all captains, or they had different roles?
Most of these were captains we're talking about.
So each of these guys is running
Well, Israel Hands was not a captain. He was actually one of Blackbeard's quartermasters, but he did captain a ship briefly for him.
Okay.
But yeah, these were all pirate captains.
Well, let's talk about Charles Vane for a second, since you brought him up earlier. Can you kind of give us an overview of his operations?
Well, he was actually down like a mini pirate in Nassau. Pirates were running Nassau during this period of time in history in the 1700s, late 1717, early 1718. They were running Nassau. Actually, it goes back almost to the early 1700s. There's kind of a funny story. The governor in Nassau was Nicholas Trott. And so Nicholas Trott, the governor down there, allowed these pirates to come into town. And Henry Avery was the first one to show up. They had been chased out of Jamaica, so they end up in Nassau. So he gave him a nice sum of money just so they could come into town and set up shop. Well, then things started getting out of hand, so he took off. He left Nassau and just gave it to the pirates. You know what's interesting? The judge who was here hanging pirates was his nephew, Nicholas Trott.
No way.
Yes, indeed.
Holy smokes.
That was his nephew. That was Uncle Nick down there that gave the pirates Nassau, and nephew was up here hanging them.
Yeah. Good Lord.
Yeah. So anyway, this was in the late 1690s when he first started showing up. And then, of course, Queen Anne's War breaks out. And then the war is over, so things are beginning to really start to effervesce down in Nassau.
Yeah.
And so Charles Vane was in Nassau, like a lot of pirates. But on the 26th of July in 1718, there was a fleet of pirates, a fleet of British ships show up in the harbor. And they were on the flagship, the Delacia, was a guy named Woodes Rogers. Now, Woodes Rogers had been appointed governor of Nassau. His instructions from King George was to go down there, get rid of these pirates, give them a pardon if they want it. If they don't want a pardon, just hang them. I just want to get that place cleaned up and back under the crown.
Yeah, yeah.
So he arrives, and so Charles Vane had a 20-gun French vessel that was sitting at anchor. It was there at anchor, and when he saw them, he fired on them. Well, they raised a white flag on those ships. I mean, the flagship or white flag goes up.
Yeah.
So Woodes Rogers sent one of his lieutenants over to Charles Vane, and to remind him he was there to give him a pardon. You don't need to be shooting at us. Well, he gave him a letter, and I have a transcript of this letter at home.
Oh, wow.
The letter he wrote to Woodes Rogers said, "I'll be glad to accept His Majesty's Act of Grace, which is a pardon.
Yeah.
But I do expect to keep what I have, as well as my crew." And of course, he wasn't going to go along with that. He had to surrender everything.
Oh, yeah.
And because he wouldn't, Woodes Rogers said, "There's no way I'm going to do that."
Yeah.
Well, now Vane realizes pretty quick he's not going to get what he wants. Now, his ship is pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is a channel they could get out around Hog Island. But Vane's ship had such a deep draft, it would run aground in that shallow channel, even at high tide. So he got with another friend of his who was there. His name was Charles Yates. Now, Yates had a smaller ship, but it was a decent-sized ship, but it was smaller. It could make the run through the channel.
Mm-hmm.
So they took Vane's ship, soaked all the sails with oil, and threw hot powder all over hot coals all over the deck, and lit this ship up at sunrise on the 28th of June, and set it adrift in the falling tide.
So they just let that, they just burned the ship
They just turned it into what they used to refer to as a fireboat.
What?
So now it is drifting in the falling tide right toward Vane's ships.
Yeah.
And so as this Willing Mind was one of the other ships in that fleet, got caught by it, and it caught on fire. And while they're trying to get out of the way of this burning ship, Vane and Yates and their crews are on the ship Catherine, sailing through around Hog Island, waving goodbye to him, fired a few rounds at him just for good measure, and as he put it, he ran up the death head, which was a pirate flag.
Oh, nice.
Oh, so he was not amused.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, they got out of there, they plundered around down in the Caribbean a bit, stole another ship, which Vane called Ranger. He named it Ranger. And on August 30th, they're sitting out here in the Pumpkin Hill Channel, right off Folly Beach. They grabbed a total of 7 ships, 6 of them they cleaned out and let them go, and 1 they burned to the water. Now, one of the ships that they took out here was a ship named Dorothy. Now, Dorothy was captained by a man named William Thompson. Now, Thompson had 90 Africans on that ship he was bringing here to sail. That is an extremely valuable cargo. So what they did was they took those 90 Africans and just let him go. So he just sailed on into town and told Governor Robert Johnson what was going on out there. Well, Robert Johnson's about to have a fit.
Yeah.
Well, Vane's ship Ranger was a very small ship. It couldn't hold them. They couldn't hold the Africans.
Right.
So they put them on Catherine. Now, there's no honor among thieves, and by this point, Vane and Yates had grown to hate each other pretty badly. So when Yates got the most valuable thing they had stolen, he just turned to his crew and said, "We got all we need, let's go." So they weighed anchor and took off and left Vane sitting there. And Vane sees them sailing away with the most valuable thing they took.
Yeah.
So he finally got underway to try to run him down, but he couldn't find him. What Yates had done, he went right down the coast here, and he took a right turn up the North Edisto River, and now he took another right turn, and he's hiding in Bohicket Creek down here behind Seabrook Island.
What the heck?
Well, Charles Vane couldn't find him, so he just got mad and left. Well, then Yates sailed back up here to town, threw himself on the mercy of Robert Johnson, the governor, and he begged for a pardon. Well, Governor Johnson granted him a pardon in exchange for giving up his ship and giving Thompson his Africans back.
Right.
Well, basically that's the last we hear of him. Now, Charles Vane at this point has decided he wants to make a big step in his pirate career. He wants to go back to Nassau and assassinate Woodes Rogers. He wants to put it back under pirate control.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a big thing there for a little man.
Yeah.
But he needs more men and more firepower.
Yeah.
So he leaves here and sails up the coast to Ocracoke. That's where Blackbeard is now hanging out off Springer's Point on the lee side of Ocracoke Island. He goes up there and tries to talk Blackbeard into going with him to Nassau.
Yeah.
Well, at that point in his career was pretty much done as being a pirate.
Yeah.
He had already gotten a pardon from governor of North Carolina, so he was basically not interested. So they had a party. Now, most accounts of this party, it lasted for 7 straight days.
Oh, my goodness.
It ran 24 hours a day for 7 straight days. You know, I don't know who all listens to this podcast and how old some of them are, but they refer to it as the Ocracoke Orgy. Well, anyway, the neighbors were up there complaining of the noise.
Yeah.
So finally the party broke up. As Vane is sailing away, they fire cannon salutes to each other, and now he's heading north again. He made it all the way up to Cape May, New Jersey. What he's trying to do now is find a ship or two to build a fleet to take back to Nassau.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got up to Cape May, New Jersey, they spotted a decent-looking ship, and there are no colors flying on the ship, so they don't know who they're dealing with without any flags up. So he kind of looked at it and moved in on them and fired at this ship, and then he ran up his pirate flag, and then the other ship appears to be slowing to a stop. Well, as it's slowing to a stop, he notices a white flag going up toward the masthead. Well, that's pretty much a symbol they got the ship now, so they start moving in on it. But then as the ship started slowing to a stop, the white flag caught the masthead, and right in the center of this white flag is the symbol of the French Navy. These idiots are shooting at a battleship of the French Navy. Cannon fire opens up on that ship at Vane.
Oh.
He's basically running around the deck screaming for him to get out of there and for the cabin boy to bring his brown pants. Well, about that time, they're running around screaming, and his quartermaster's John Rackham.
Okay.
And he'd been with him a while. He was here with him off Folly, and now he's with him up there.
Yeah.
Rackham thought they could take the ship. And he said, no, I'm giving you an order. Well, see, the only time a captain's orders had to be obeyed to the letter on a pirate ship is either going into an attack, throughout an attack, and retreating. The rest of the time, if the captain told the crew to do something, it's going to be a suggestion they'll take a vote on.
Wow.
So anyway, well, finally, they had to obey the captain's orders. They're in a battle, so they got to get out of there. Well, they got away without a scratch. Well, over the next few days, Rackham whipped that crew up into a frenzy and called for a vote. And out of his rather substantially numbered crew, there were only 15 men voted to keep Charles Vane as the captain. Everybody else said he's too big a coward to be the captain anymore, throw him off the ship.
What?
So they threw him off the ship and put him in a small rowboat, gave him those 15 men to keep him company, gave him some jugs of water and beef jerky, and set him adrift somewhere between here and Cape May, New Jersey.
Wow.
And then they voted in John Rackham as their new captain.
Yeah.
Well, Vane got regrouped, and he was still determined to make it down to Nassau. But he was caught in a storm off the Bay Islands, off the coast of Honduras, in 1720. And his ship was wrecked on a small island, and he was the only survivor. So he got shipwrecked on this little island. He's sitting there all by himself. Well, a guy named Captain Halford knew that island it was charted as a source of fresh water. So Halford anchored offshore, and now he's coming ashore with some men in a longboat. And when they come ashore, Halford and Charles Vane were acquainted with each other. Halford at one point had been a pirate. He had taken a king's pardon, and now he is a legitimate merchant captain.
Oh, wow.
And he found him sitting there, and he said, well, I'm surprised to find you here. He said, Halford, get me off this island. I've been stuck here. I was shipwrecked. Halford said, if I take you aboard my ship, I know you. It'll only be a matter of time before you'd be caballing with the men, knock me in the head, and take my ship a-pirating. And he said, no. He said, you're in a good spot. He said, I'm going to leave you here. He said, but I'll be back by here in about a month. And if you're still here, I will take you with me in custody, and I'll turn you in for the bounty.
What?
So Halford sailed away and left him. Well, it wasn't long till another ship shows up. Another ship coming to get fresh water. These guys come ashore. They see Charles Vane sitting there. This guy had no idea who Charles Vane was. And he said he got shipwrecked. I need to get off this island. He said, well, I can always use an extra man. Come with us. So we took him on his ship. So now Charles Vane is just now living a quiet, unassuming life on this guy's merchant ship. Well, as they're down in the islands, get on down into the Caribbean, there's a reach between two small islands, and they're going through this little reach. And as these ships are passing each other, well, the guy that had Vane saw another ship coming, and the captain were friends. They recognized each other, and they waved. And well, the other captain came about, dropped anchor, and he came over to the ship where Vane was located to have lunch with him. And while they're walking across the deck, the captain that was invited aboard looked down and saw Vane messing with the ropes. He said, good heavens, man, why do you have him on your ship? He said, who? He said, that man right there. He said, well, I found him on an island and just picked him up. He needed to get off the island. I needed an extra man. He said, I realized that. I found him on that island a few weeks ago. This was Captain Halford. He had brought aboard his ship. So Halford immediately placed him into custody and took him on his ship. He carried him to Jamaica and turned him over to the Jamaican authorities in February of 1720. He sat in prison for 13 months. And it was the 29th of March of 1721, after his trial, that he was taken out and hanged at Gallows Point, Jamaica.
Holy smokes. That's crazy. What happened to, I think, the quartermaster, Reacher? Or,
you're talking Rackham, John Rackham?
Yeah, whatever happened
well,
to the
he
crew
decided the best thing we can do, boys, is go back down to Nassau and take that pardon that governor offered us.
Oh, wow.
So it took them a while, but they did finally make it back down to Nassau, and they did get the king's pardon.
Okay.
He didn't stay out of trouble, though.
Yeah.
No, he had a pardon for quite a while. He actually ended up with 2 before it was over with.
Oh, really?
No, he actually went back into piracy again. And it was on the 22nd of August of 1720. He stole a Dutch merchant ship named William that was anchored off of New Providence Island down there. And he and some of the crew took it back out in piracy. And it didn't take long. On the 17th of November in 1720, he's standing on the gallows in Jamaica with his head in a noose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't take long.
Yeah. So you brought up Blackbeard and how Blackbeard was kind of at the end of his piracy.
He's an interesting character.
Can you give us the
Absolutely.
Blackbeard's a very, very common, popular name.
Yeah. Well, I've got a lot of books at home, pirate books, a lot of documents. The most common name that he used and would allow people to use when they were referring to him was Thatch. Thatch seemed to be the more common name that was used. Occasionally you see the name Teach. But he's had so many names that people have given him and mispronunciations of Teach, Tech, Tatch, Thatch, Thatcher, Drummond. I mean, all these different names.
Yeah.
I've got books that said he was born in Jamaica. I've got books that say he was born in England. There's books that said he was born in North Carolina. Some say Virginia. Some say Philadelphia. I mean...
So do we know or not?
Yes, absolutely we do. I'm going to tell you what I know, and I do believe is the truth.
Okay.
I've got a lot of people that I've become friends with over the years in this business, but one of my dearest friends is a guy named Kevin Duffus. Kevin is a great friend of mine. He lives in North Carolina, and he actually spent a great deal of his life on the coast of North Carolina. And he's a tremendous historian. There's not a cable history channel this man probably hadn't been on.
Really?
He's written books about the lighthouses on the Outer Banks, shipwrecks on the Outer Banks. He's written a book about the World War II activity on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And all the German U-boats and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But years ago, he wanted to write a book about Blackbeard. So he started working on his book on Blackbeard. And the things that he came up with were astounding. Couldn't find him in England. Couldn't find anybody named Edward Teach in England. So a good place to start was up here in North Carolina where he last lived. He had a nice tract of land on Bath Creek that he inherited when his father died.
Wow.
Now this is where it kind of got fascinating, because the guy that we believe was his father was here in Charleston visiting some friends in 1711. It was July the 20th, 1711, when he realizes he's not going to live through the night. He's contracted yellow fever.
What?
And he's about to die, and he knows it. So there's an attorney that lives here named John Morgan. So he was able to get in touch with John Morgan through a friend, and he came to the house where he was laid up in his sick bed. And he told Morgan, we got to draft a will. And he wanted him to be the executor of his estate. So this handwritten will was actually found in the state archives in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Now, just to the point, he said, once I die, all of my land and holdings will go to my wife and son. So on the 21st of July of 1711, he died here. I think, and I say this with a little bit of certainty, but not quite 100% certainty.
Yeah.
I believe he's buried in what is today the Circular Congregational Graveyard right up Meeting Street here.
Really?
And the reason I say that is because back when it was the independent church on that property, that's where Presbyterians worshipped, and he was Presbyterian.
Okay.
Okay. So now, so this man's name that died, his son, came home from Queen Anne's War after working a privateer down in Jamaica, where he was probably the quartermaster. He came back to that land in North Carolina, finding out at that point his father was dead. He didn't know his father was dead for 2 years.
You got no communication when you're out there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when he comes home, finds out his dad's dead and his mom's remarried.
Holy
and now he's
cow.
got this land.
Yeah.
So the man that died here was named Captain James Beard.
That was the name. Really?
And we think Edward Beard is actually Blackbeard's real name.
Interesting.
Yeah. So where were the Beards living in 1690 when their bouncing baby boy would have been born? Well, it's good indications now. There's some records found of Captain James and his wife Elizabeth Beard living in 1690 right up this river in Goose Creek, South Carolina.
No way.
So we kind of now believe that Blackbeard was a homeboy born in the hood up the river there.
What?
And then moved to North Carolina when he was 15.
Do you know why they moved up there?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Robert Daniel, who was our lieutenant governor back then.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Daniel was the man Daniel Island is named after.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He and James Moore Jr., and several other ships went to St. Augustine in the very earliest days of Queen Anne's War and attacked St. Augustine. Burned a big chunk of it to the ground. Robert Daniel convinced Captain James Beard to go with them. And we believe he convinced him to go with him. So when he moved up to the North Territory, as they called it, up to North Carolina, he had told James Beard, who was his neighbor up here, I'll help you get some land in North Carolina if you want to come up there. So we believe he was the one to help secure that land for him on Bath Creek.
Interesting. Wow.
And they had two nice neighbors, Tobias Knight, who was the collector of customs, and the governor of North Carolina, Charles Eden.
There you go. Good people to know.
There you go.
So when Edward Beard realized that his father was dead, is that when he decided to remain in piracy?
Well, no, he wasn't a pirate. He was
a privateer.
He came home. He came home off that privateer, planning to be a merchant captain like his dad.
Okay.
You see, when he was 19, his daddy took him to Philadelphia and left him with a friend of his to teach him how to sail.
Okay. Okay.
And then he went into the war. Now the war is over, and he's home.
Yeah.
Well, North Carolina was struggling financially. See, the same folks that own South Carolina also own North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, today, those same people, those 8 guys, would own what is today about 11 states and some of Mexico. Because King Charles gave him a big old tract of land that went all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so when he gets home, North Carolina is struggling. They've had a lot of skirmishes with a native tribe up there called the Tuscaroras. Now, since they're a proprietary colony, they've got no royal army, no royal navy, no royal nothing.
Yeah.
So they're having to hire men in a militia to help fend off these attacks from this native tribe. Well, they finally made peace with the tribe, but they've pretty much drained the treasury. They're in desperate shape. But then the governor found out something had happened that could bail them out. It was on the 31st of July in 1715 when there was a fleet of Spanish ships left Veracruz in South America. They're heading to St. Augustine for some provisions before going home to Spain. Well, on their way up the coast of Florida, they got hit with a hurricane. 7 of those ships got separated from the others, and then these 7 ships got separated from each other along about a 70-80 mile stretch of Florida coastline, about as far north as where basically Melbourne and Cocoa Beach are located, and as far south as where St. Lucie is, or Port St. Lucie today. And they got separated from each other, and they got washed toward the beach in this hurricane, ran up on a coral reef a couple of 100 yards off the beach, and sank in about 20-25 feet of water on a coral reef. The reason this is important, these ships were hauling millions of dollars of gold and silver back to Spain.
Good Lord.
And now it's sitting right off the beaches there in Florida, and a couple of, couple 100 yards off the beach and 20 feet of water.
Yeah.
That's some low-hanging fruit. Yeah. Well, pirates started hearing about this in the Caribbean.
Oh, that's
That
trouble.
was the first time we hear about Charles Vane. He's with Henry Jennings. Archibald Hamilton, the governor down in Jamaica, had sent them up there to steal some gold and silver.
Okay.
It eventually cost him his job, but anyway, that is the governor. So anyway, he sent them up there, and they're off of Key Biscayne, Florida on Christmas Eve heading up there. Well, anyway, so word finally reached North Carolina, and the governor went, whoa, look at this. So what did he do? He collected some money from some of the local folks up there and some of the businesses, and called in his next door neighbor, Edward. I need your help.
Yeah.
And he said, I got some money for you. And he said, I need you to get a crew together and take a ship and go to Florida.
Yeah.
And find one of those shipwrecks and steal some of that gold and silver. We broke.
Yeah.
So the bottom line, the man that became Blackbeard the Pirate was paid to do it by his next door neighbor, the governor of North Carolina.
Did he ask him because he was a privateer, had the experience?
We had the experience. He knew how to be. He knew he was a captain. He knew his skills on a privateer. Figured nobody better for the job.
Exactly.
So his plan was to go to Florida, steal some gold and silver, bring it back, and then be a merchant captain again, most likely.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was his plan.
Yeah.
But when he got to Florida, guess what he found? It was a man-of-war battleship from the Spanish Navy on top of the shipwreck. Wow. And every one of them had a battleship on the shipwreck to protect it from plunder.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he didn't want to go tangling with the Spanish Navy now.
Yeah.
He wasn't nearly equipped to do that, so he just went right around him and headed down to Nassau. So when he got down to Nassau, he meets a guy named Benjamin Hornigold. Now, Hornigold had a fleet of ships called the Flying Gang. And Hornigold has decided, well, why don't you just sail with us? So he took him into his fleet. And he taught him and mentored him and taught him how to be a good pirate and sail with him for basically to the summer of 1717. And then they've all broken up. And then that's when Blackbeard decided, well, I still don't have anything good to take back home in North Carolina, so I may as well keep going. So he started building a fleet of his own.
Holy cow.
So before it was over with, he had a fleet of 4 ships and about 700 men with him.
So Hornigold was Blackbeard's mentor as far as pirating goes.
Yeah. And what's interesting is when Woodes Rogers showed up, Benjamin Hornigold took the pardon and became the captain of a privateer hunting pirates for the governor.
No way.
He spent the rest of his days trying to run down Charles Vane.
No way.
Yeah, he had him in his crosshairs every chance he could get him.
Now, Blackbeard's flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, correct? When did that come into play?
Okay. Well, what happened is this. First of all, when he leaves Nassau, he had one ship, and he helped get another pirate, Stede Bonnet, get his ship repaired because they had tangled up with one of those Spanish battleships off the coast of Florida. Yeah. So they were all shot up and beat up. So Blackbeard offered to fix up his ship for him and get it seaworthy and run it for him while his boys are healing up. So when he leaves Nassau, he's got 2 ships.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, they went up to the Delaware Bay. They bounced around and ended up at the Delaware Bay. He grabbed 18 ships up there.
18 ships.
Now, Blackbeard at this point has declared his own private one-man war against England. Now, the reason being is Blackbeard is Scottish. He's a Scottish Presbyterian. Queen Anne was Scottish, okay? She died in 1714, and they did not find anybody in her family to replace her. She had, I think, 16, 17 pregnancies and outlived every kid she had. Well, her half-brother, James, instead of making him the king, they went to Germany and got King George. So if you think the Brexit thing made people mad a while back, how about a king of England that doesn't even speak English? He speaks German.
Good Lord.
So because of this, Blackbeard declared war on England. So every time he would grab a ship, if he found out it was a British ship, he not only stole what he wanted, if they happened to have anything left, he'd just throw it overboard. That was his first shot across the bow of England.
Yeah.
Well, after they leave there, he goes all the way across to the Caribbean, to the far edges off the coast of Barbados. Now, he struck out on the gold and silver. He still wanted to take something of value back to North Carolina. And there's one thing, if he can get his hands on this, he'll go home a hero. And that happened to be Africans. So now he's off the coast of Barbados, and he grabbed a French slave ship named La Concorde. You see, traditionally, these slave ships, when they leave the west coast of Africa, would stop in Barbados to get resupplied. Plus, they would leave there with anywhere from 450 to 500 Africans. That's a lot of people to maintain and keep healthy.
Yeah.
So they would start selling them then. They'd just start, systematically selling them off across the Caribbean, South America, Central America before they'd make it up here.
Yeah.
By the time they make it up here, most of these ships were down to maybe 50, 75 people.
Yeah.
And so he's sitting there patiently waiting, and here comes this French vessel called La Concorde. It was a French slave ship with had 480, give or take, Africans on it. So he took it to an uninhabited island, threw all the Africans off on this island with the French crew. He kept 60. And the reason he kept 60, if you think about it, makes sense. He's going to sail this large ship called La Concorde. It's going to take 100 men to crew that ship properly.
You're going to use
He brought 40 out of North Carolina with him. You take 60 Africans, that gives him a crew of 100.
Yep.
Plus, when he gets them home in North Carolina, he can sell them, and they're worth a fortune. So he took these Africans and he loaded them up on his ship, rearmed it with 40 guns, and then he changed the name of it to Queen Anne's Revenge.
Oh, wow, that was
his second shot across the bow of England. So there you go.
Yeah.
So now he's got 3 ships.
Yeah.
So now they cross the Caribbean, and now they get back to the east coast, or actually off the central coast, now off the coast of Central America. down around Honduras. They're down in the Bay Islands. These old wooden ships took a beating, so he's got to get the ship worked on. So they're down there careening and working on the ships. Along comes another ship named Adventure. It was out of Jamaica. The captain was David Harriet. Well, David Harriet spotted Blackbeard's fleet. So he sailed in there to see what they were doing. And Blackbeard just said, hey, look what fell in our lap. So what did he do? He stole the ship. He put it in the fleet. He threw David Harriet on Stede Bonnet's ship because Stede Bonnet didn't have a clue what he was doing anyway. He said, please show that man how to sail that ship. So now Blackbeard's got 4 ships and by most accounts around 700 men.
Wow.
But see the articles, every ship had their own constitution. Yeah. And in the articles it spells it out that every man receives an equal share of the plunder. Well, the most valuable thing that Blackbeard is carrying and the most valuable treasure he ever stole were 60 human beings. Mm-hmm. Well, he can't split up 60 human beings with 700 men. The math doesn't work.
Right.
So he went straight away over to Nassau. He sent 300 men into town to the grocery store, and then he weighed anchor and took off without them.
What?
So he's downsizing the corporation. He's downsizing the corporation, you might say. Yeah. So now he's down to 400 guys, and now they're coming up the coast trying to get home in North Carolina with the most valuable thing he could take home. Mm-hmm. But he's got a problem. His crew's sick. You see, while they were down cruising the Caribbean, they made a lot of ports of call, went to a lot of taverns, and met a lot of young ladies, and participated in what they used to call negotiated affections. And they've come back to the ship with a raging, hot-burning case of the pox. We ain't talking about smallpox here. These boys are burning something awful now. I mean, that was just another word for syphilis back then. Yeah. Well, they didn't know what they were going to do because there's no help in North Carolina, and they're all just dying.
Yeah.
So finally, somebody spoke up. I've even heard it was Stede Bonnet that suggested it. He knew where the place they needed to go. So on the 4th of June, 1718, about 12 miles offshore in the North Channel, they showed up. They grabbed 5 ships out here, kidnapped about 200 people off these ships, shoved them in the hold of Queen Anne's Revenge, and then he brought all 9 ships up closer into town and blockaded the North Channel.
Holy cow.
He sat out there for a couple of days and shut this city down. Now, he sent 3 men into town to find Governor Robert Johnson.
And we're talking about Charleston. He's blockading Charleston.
Charleston Harbor. This is right out here in the Charleston Harbor.
Yep.
So he sent them into town to find Governor Robert Johnson. Well, Captain Richards told him, if you don't give us what we want, we're going to kill all these people, burn their ships to the water, and burn every ship in the harbor.
Yeah.
Well, the governor's going, what do you want?
Yeah.
They wanted medicine. Well, now, the drug that they were after was mercury. They thought that was going to cure this problem. You know, pirates used to have an old saying. As they would be heading into town and going into the taverns, they'd all huddle up and reminding one another, y'all should watch out for some of these women in here, boys. Remember now, an evening with Venus could cost you a lifetime with mercury. So they got 400 English pounds worth of mercury, along with a box of urethra syringes. It was self-administered. They boxed all this up and gave it to Captain Richards. He went out there and gave it to Blackbeard. He let every hostage go. Then by June the 10th, he was back home in North Carolina.
Wow.
The governor gave him a pardon, and on July 1, 1718. And so he was a free man in North Carolina. But he was ambushed on the 22nd of November, 1718, by 2 ships out of Virginia, behind Ocracoke Island. Up in Virginia, Governor Spotswood up there, or Deputy Governor Spotswood, knew that Blackbeard was in North Carolina. Now, Virginia's a royal colony.
Yeah.
And he knew the governor was not going to let him send British warships into a proprietary colony, which was owned by these 8 men in England.
Yeah.
So I guess he thought it was easier to ask for forgiveness and permission. So he got 2 merchant ships, dressed up 60 members of the Royal Navy in civilian clothes, put the mission under the command of Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy. They slipped down into North Carolina, found Blackbeard behind Ocracoke Island. A battle ensued, and he had his head cut off.
What?
They cut Blackbeard's head off in the heat of the battle.
Holy cow.
Yep.
Was there any repercussion from North Carolina over that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because here's the thing. Blackbeard had a stolen ship with him at that point, but now Lieutenant Maynard couldn't charge him with piracy because he didn't know it was a stolen ship. It was named Rose Emily. Okay. So, but he could charge him with treason because they were shooting at and killing members of the Royal Navy. Even though they didn't identify themselves as members of the Navy, they didn't even have on uniforms and there were no flags on the ship.
Right.
Blackbeard actually shot at him in self-defense. But he was charged, they were going to charge him with treason for shooting at and killing members of the Royal Navy. Well, they took the ones they could figure out actually shot at him. The rest of Blackbeard's crew, they had to let them go.
Yeah. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Anybody from Blackbeard's crew ever go on to do other things?
Well, yeah, absolutely. William Howard, who was his quartermaster, we believe eventually owned every bit of Ocracoke Island. Edward Salter, who was one of Blackbeard's crew, actually became a North Carolina legislator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, even back then they put pirates in public office.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Very interesting.
But here's a few other quick notes about Blackbeard. Hollywood portrays this man as some ferocious, mean, just cut down anything in his way.
Yeah.
And he must have been 50 years old when he died and probably a pirate 15 years. Here's the truth. If you add up every minute, this man probably sailed under a black flag. You might get 23 months.
Really?
And he died when he was 28.
What? 28?
He was 28 when he died.
No way.
And he never killed a living soul when he sailed under a black flag.
Really?
No. There's Kevin, my buddy in North Carolina. He wrote a tremendously good book. It's called The Last Days of Blackbeard the Pirate.
Last Days of Blackbeard the Pirate.
Yeah, that's the book that I utilize, and some of the work in this book has helped me a lot. And he's Kevin's a great guy. And you can find his book locally. You can find it on Amazon. You can find a copy of it at the old Exchange building in the gift shop.
Okay.
Yeah, it's The Last Days of Blackbeard the Pirate by Kevin Duffus. Fabulous book.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's crazy how Hollywood turned that into just a crazy character.
In fact, he told me he's heading out to Hollywood to do some show. Somebody wanted to interview him and do some history-based show about Blackbeard's treasure.
Yeah.
And we just kind of laughed about that one. I mean, burying treasures, Hollywood is pretty much Hollywood stuff anyway.
Yeah, pirates didn't do that.
Oh goodness, if they stole something, they didn't. They either ate it, drank it, or spent it. There wasn't anything left to put in the ground. And if you bury, I live on the beach out of Sullivan. I don't Isle of Palms. If I buried something out there on that beach, I wouldn't find it within a week. It'd be gone. Gee, you didn't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just don't have a record of a buried treasure.
Right.
And the most valuable thing the man ever stole were 60 human beings.
Yeah.
That was his most valuable treasure.
Yeah. Whatever happened to Queen Anne's Revenge?
It was scuttled. When he got home to North Carolina, it was so big.
Yeah.
When they got to the Beaufort Sound, where they used to call it the Topsail Inlet, now it is called Beaufort Inlet or Beaufort Sound. It was so large, it wouldn't sail across the Pamlico Sound. It was a day's sail through the Sound up to Bath. The ship would run aground in the shallow channels.
Yeah.
So instead, he just scuttled it.
Yeah.
It's been found. They have found a shipwreck that they have determined that they're 99.9% sure it was Queen Anne's Revenge.
Yeah.
And a lot of the artifacts that have been brought up from it are on display at the North Carolina Maritime Museum in Beaufort, North Carolina.
Okay. Very cool.
They even found a urethra syringe. It still had a trace of mercury in it.
That's crazy, bro.
I
That's
know.
how you know it's Queen Anne's Revenge.
Wrap your mind around that one, boys. I know.
As I'm guessing people routinely scuba dive that area.
No. That's you'd have a better chance of getting in the Vatican.
Oh, really?
I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. You'd have a better chance of breaking into the Vatican than dive one of those shipwreck sites. Those are any of the ones off Florida.
Okay.
All those shipwrecks. Probably about 80% of that gold and silver is probably still out there.
Oh, really? That's crazy.
People find it.
Yeah.
But if you find it on the beach, it's yours.
Yeah.
You can't dive in the water and go find it. Well, there were some families a few years ago. I read about this one. It was on a family outing. The family were all divers, and they went out and did a little scuba diving on the reef, and they came back with about, I think it was $100,000 worth of gold doubloons.
What?
But they couldn't keep it because there's so many claims been placed upon that. Some of it goes back to the Spanish government. Some of it goes to the state of Florida. I think they got to keep 10% of it. But $10,000 for a 30-minute dive ain't too shabby.
Yeah, ain't too bad.
But, there was also a few people a few years ago walking along the beaches down there. That's why they call that part of Florida's beach the Treasure Coast. You people, you go down there after a thunderstorm or a hurricane, there's an army of people with metal detectors on that beach.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, one family walked the beach one morning to enjoy a sunrise on vacation, and there was a big storm the night before.
Yeah.
I think they said they found $10,000 worth of gold and silver on the beach that morning.
Good Lord.
Yeah, they found it. It
Good
just
to
washed
go.
up. It just washed up out of the storm, and it was theirs. I mean, if it's on the beach, it is free. It is yours.
We'll talk about how Blackbeard's kind of Hollywood reputation is this pillaging, destruction. Yeah. Was there any pirates that actually did that type of stuff? That
Edward Lowe, who he showed up off our coast one time. He was just a sadistic I mean, he was just a sadistic guy. He really was. He was known to do things like catch a ship, and if the captain wouldn't give up where their valuables were on the ship or tell him what he wanted, one instance he cut some guy's lips off or his ears off and fried them up and made the quartermaster eat them. I mean, he was a cruel guy.
Good Lord.
Vane was also a very sadistic guy too.
Okay.
He was a harsh man.
Yeah.
In fact, when they found that camp down on the coast of Florida, when he and Henry Jennings found, they had gotten some intel on where they were storing away a lot of the gold and silver they had already retrieved. They had a separate location. They found it.
Yeah.
And they didn't leave a man standing when they stole it all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they wiped out everybody that was guarding it.
Yeah.
So there'd be no witnesses.
Yeah. What? So we know that Blackbeard's flag, at least from the Hollywood side, is the skeleton holding the spear with. You know, what are some other flags?
Well, that flag actually belonged to a guy named John Quelch.
Okay.
He was executed in Boston, I believe it was 1702. Some people think that Blackbeard took his flag, but the only record of anybody's mentioning of Blackbeard flying a flag was one mention of him flying a death head. Now, the death head was nothing but a skull. So it's questionable as to whether that was actually Blackbeard's flag. Okay. I mean, it's been widely accepted, but like a lot of pirate history, it's based in folklore and urban legend. Yeah. In fact, up in that part of North Carolina, they have it on their city cars. I mean, cops have that flag on their car.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of their logo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was some controversy a while back because it looks like it's got horns like a skeleton.
Yeah.
But if you look at it closely, it's actually got 3 points like a crown.
Oh, okay.
So
Queen Anne's Revenge.
Yeah, so there was a little controversy there, I think. I don't know if they ever ironed that out. That was a while back. But Kevin and I have talked about this. You know, it's sort of questionable if that was actually his real flag.
Okay.
But it's widely accepted by most people that it was. But how do you know? Yeah. It's not like we were there.
Yeah. What are some of the other common pirate flags that captains would fly with their ships?
Well, let's see. Let me see. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. His first name. His last name was Tew, T-E-W. Okay. He had a flex bicep holding a dagger.
Oh, really?
Charles Vane's flag was red, and it had a guy holding a dagger and an hourglass. Okay. And it was red.
Do we know some of the symbolism with these flags?
Yeah, if you saw a hourglass with wings on it, it would tell people your time's about up.
Oh, okay.
Time's flying, folks. It's about up. But flags mean different things. Yeah. Red flags meant no quarter given. Black flags mean we'll give you quarter, just which means let you go. Right. And that tradition goes back, from what I've read, to the French Navy. The French Navy would fly a black flag, a solid black flag, and as long as you would allow the Navy to board your ship, check you out, as long as the flag was black, that means you're not in any trouble. We'll let you go, unless we think we need to arrest you. But if this ship suddenly tried to take a stand against them, they would switch it out to red, which meant no quarter given. Okay. Now we're taking you. And we will take you dead or alive. Yeah. They referred to that the red flag as the Jolly Rouge, which is French for pretty red. Jolly Rouge sounds like something else. Jolly Roger? Yeah. There you go.
And the Jolly Roger is traditionally the skull with the cross, the cross sabers, right?
Yeah, or any pirate flag could be considered the Jolly Roger. Old Roger was a nickname that pirates had for the devil. They called him Old Roger.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, very interesting. What about Davy Jones? Does that name come up at all?
Well, Davy Jones' locker is basically the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. I've read a half a dozen different things as to what that could mean. I really couldn't give you a solid, good answer. Yeah. There was actually somebody named Dave Jones, from what I understand. He was considered a saintly guy, and I don't know, maybe he drowned. Yeah. And so since he drowned, they figure, you're going to go join Davy Jones in his locker. So there you go. I mean, I've read that before. So
do you have like a favorite pirate that you like to study or read?
Well, working on a book on Charles Vane has given me a lot of insight. And working on that book, The other book that I started working on, and I've still got to do some editing on it, and the manuscript's done. But every time I think I'm done, I find something else out.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin was kidding with me one day. He said, "Dude, you're just going to have to stop at some point and just write it.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just keep looking, and he said if you keep looking, you'll change it every time you look."
Yeah.
But it's basically, the name of this book was A Walk with a Pirate.
Mm.
And what it is my tour that I give on a daily basis in writing.
Oh, yeah.
With photographs of some of the landmarks that I point out and we
that'd be
talk
great.
about.
Yeah.
And because really all the pirate history stuff, I mean, there's been several books written about Charleston's pirates.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one was written by a buddy of mine, Chris Downey. Chris wrote a great book called Charleston and the Golden Age of Piracy, and he wrote a very good book on Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate out of Barbados, who was executed here. In fact, right out there was the last view they had, he and his crew.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Is there
Crazy.
like a pirate that you think a lot of people should know about that is like I wouldn't say a no name, but a lot of people are aware of maybe a super interesting story?
Well, there was a good book written on a guy named Bartholomew Roberts. Bartholomew Roberts, his nickname was Black Bart. He was actually captured. He was a navigator on a merchant ship. And he was captured and taken aboard this ship because they needed a navigator.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to be pressed into service. Well, the captain that they had was killed in a battle. Now, Roberts, who I've also read his real name was John Roberts. So John Roberts, Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart. The crew really liked the guy.
Yeah.
He apparently took a liking to them, and he liked them, so they made him their new captain. He was voted in by the crew as their new captain.
Yeah.
But he was an interesting guy because he didn't drink. He would not drink alcohol. He didn't care what the crew did, but he didn't drink alcohol. In fact, when he would take a ship, he would invite the captain of the other ship over to his vessel.
Once he took over?
Yeah, once he took their ship, he would invite the other captain over.
Yeah.
They would split a pot of tea and discuss the political climate of the day. Then after he'd stolen what he wanted, he'd most likely just let him go.
Okay.
And on Sundays, he actually held church on the deck of the ship.
Really?
And he was the minister.
Really?
He would preach
Interesting.
on Sundays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did his name Black Bard?
Bart. B-A-R-T.
Black Bart?
Yeah.
Do we know where that nickname came from, or that name?
Nicknames come from a lot of places.
Yeah.
It's usually some type of cosmetic feature.
Okay.
Usually black hair would do it. Black facial hair would do it. I mean, I've had people ask me about blue beard, red beard. I said, I don't know. I don't know these people. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. I don't know. I never heard of them,
Yeah.
But it's usually based on some cosmetic feature.
Yeah.
They would give them nicknames based on that.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And a lot of times they would change their names when they would attack a ship just to protect their identity.
Yeah, it makes
I
sense.
mean, you have to understand, back in those days, they didn't have some guy standing on the transom with an iPhone videotaping them when they're cleaning out a ship. So there's no way to really properly identify somebody other than an eyewitness.
Yeah.
So if a guy's captured down the road, we're going to take you for piracy. You attacked so-and-so's ship a week ago. No, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a guy named Captain Edwards. My name's Stede Bonnet. Captain Edwards was an alias that Stede Bonnet used.
Gotcha.
And so I've never heard of the guy.
Yeah.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it
Smart.
gives them a little plausible deniability. So that was nothing uncommon either.
Talking about pirate ships, what was the daily life or the life like on a pirate ship? We've talked about quartermaster, navigator, captain.
Yeah.
What are some of the positions and the life on the ship like?
It was tough going. I mean, when they'd leave port, they were in good shape.
Yeah.
Early on, though, unless they'd been able to attack a ship and steal what they had, it got pretty stingy on that ship because food was tough. Water doesn't keep. People think they used to drink rum, just to get drunk. No, it was actually what they would use to stay hydrated. And plus it kept the morale of the crew up.
Yeah.
And they would take, in fact, you can thank the British for this one. They used to squeeze citrus juice into the alcohol to give them vitamin C.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's why they got the nickname limeys. From the
Interesting.
lime juice they would put in the drink.
Yeah.
And the alcohol. But water wouldn't keep. It would go stagnant.
Yeah.
But alcohol would keep. And so any chance they had to steal any type of alcoholic beverage, they would steal it. I mean, because they needed it for hydration. And it was part of really, you might say, a staple in their diet.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest delicacy they would serve or eat on a pirate ship was sea turtles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sea turtles. And they would actually cook it in the shell.
Holy cow.
You know, the shell actually was a great big bowl.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how they would cook it. They would serve it up that way.
Would they just be catching them all the time off the side?
Yeah,
of
they
the
catch.
ship?
They fish, fresh fish.
Good
sea
Lord.
turtles was a delicacy there.
Wow, that's crazy.
And so, but that's kind of tough. I mean, because how often are you going to find a sea turtle out there? I mean, once in a while, one may come up for a breath of air.
Yeah.
And if you just happen to be timing it just right, you can snag it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there
Well,
you go.
I know when I was in the Navy, we'd be fishing off the side of the ship all the time. We'd be catching all kinds of stuff. So I assume that's what their main food was, just the fish they were pulling out every day.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah. They would fish. They would, they would also have things that would keep.
Yeah.
Like hardtack.
You mentioned beef jerky earlier one time. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Jerked meats.
Yeah.
Hardtack, which is basically nothing but old stale bread.
Delicacy.
Yeah, yeah. If you're down to the hardtack, times are tough. It was tough. But, but the way I'm attired today was probably very rarely worn by many pirates.
Okay.
Because you're out at sea. Well, if you've been in the Navy, there ain't no shade out there.
Oh, yeah.
It's hot on that deck.
Yeah.
Most of them didn't wear anything but a loincloth.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
Shedding
barefoot
layers.
and
Yeah.
pretty much naked out on the ships. I mean, just to stay cool and to do the daily task that they had to do.
Yeah.
And, of course, they'd wear shoes if they were in a battle. Of course, you don't want to drop a cannonball on your big toe.
Yeah.
That would hurt.
Yeah.
So, but there were kids on ships, too. And people don't
really?
realize there were kids on pirate ships.
On pirate ships?
Yeah, they
there
called
were
them
kids.
They called them powder monkeys.
Okay.
Because, you see, they look like little monkeys running up and down the rat lines and up and down the riggings to set the sails and to haul the gunpowder up and down to the men.
They just pick these kids up from other ships or when they're in
they
port
would just
or
pick
whatever?
them up. They would go into a port, and the kid just, maybe his parents have died.
Yeah.
And they're just on the streets.
Yeah.
They need something to do. Come on with us then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were 12, 13-year-old kids on pirate ships.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so, like, major positions on the ship, you got the captain, you got the quartermaster, the navigator.
Yeah, first mate.
First mate.
Yeah.
What are some of the roles of these positions?
Well, the first mate, of course, he's kind of the guy that's running the ship if the captain's not available. Well, pirate ships are floating democracies anyway, and everything on a pirate ship is going to be voted on.
Mm.
They'll vote on everything. They'll vote on where they're going, a ship that they want to attack it. They even vote on who they want for the captain.
Yeah.
And they also had their articles, the rules on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
But the quartermaster, of course, he was the disciplinarian, and he was also the man in charge of inventory on the ship.
Mm.
Navigator, that's pretty obvious what he would do.
Yeah.
And of course, the captain was the titular head of the ship.
Yeah.
And his orders had to be obeyed in battle.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much the only time it had to be obeyed, like in a battle. And of course, they wanted a captain who knew how to sail and all. He could pretty much wear any hat. He knew how to navigate, but that takes that off of him if he's got a navigator that can help him out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But then you've got down below there, you just got the grunt crew. Just the guys doing whatever need to be done.
You got the deckhands,
Yeah,
and they're also firing the cannons.
Yeah, you got the gunners,
Yeah.
the powder monkeys, the gunners.
Cooks. Anybody
they had-
designated as a cook?
Yeah, they would try to find somebody that knew how to cook.
Yeah.
That was important.
Yeah.
They want somebody at least know how to boil water. So yeah, but food was a big thing. Trying to keep decent food, because good food means good morale.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that's one of the biggest challenges, is keeping the morale up on a ship like
Yeah.
that, because they could go for days and days and days and not see anything to attack or steal,
Right.
and they may be days out of a port, and so it was kind of tough out there.
Crew
they
gets
get
restless.
they get in the doldrums out there, and I mean it's really bad.
Mhm.
No wind in the sails, and they're just adrift in the current. I mean that's some long days for them people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, long days.
Yeah. What about the pirate code? We hear about the pirate code. Is that
Basically,
a real
you're
thing?
talking about the articles.
Okay.
Every ship had articles.
Yeah.
It was like their own constitution. They have articles in the United States Constitution. They have articles on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And the way a man will become a member of a crew, they called it going on account. He either read the articles or have them read to him if he was illiterate, and then he would put his name or mark at the bottom of the paper. It was called going on account.
Okay.
And usually they could vary from ship to ship. I've got many examples of articles from different ships at home.
Okay.
And commonly the first one is always the same as how they're paid. Every man receives one share of the plunder. The quartermaster and the first mate and the navigator will receive a share and a half, and the captain receives 2 shares.
Okay.
The next one behind that was usually, shall a man be kept keeping secrets or stealing from the company, he shall either be marooned, leaving him with a jug of water, a pistol with one shot, or he will receive Moses' law. Now, obviously, marooning, that's kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Pitch him off on an island and leave him.
Yeah.
Moses' law is a beating, a severe beating. Moses' law is 40 lashes less one upon a bare back. And they used a whip known as a cat o' nine tails. Now, people look at me some days and say, well, 40 lashes less one. Why didn't you just hit them 40 times? Because they think 40 is fatal. It's not like 39 lashes improve the guy, but still.
Yeah.
But 40 lashes, 39 lashes. And then this tradition goes back to the British Royal Navy. They would take this whip, they called it the cat, and they would shove it in a canvas bag and hang it on the center mast of the ship so everybody could see it hanging there to be reminded if they do something they ought not be doing, they'll be letting the cat out of the bag.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
And the cat of nine tails, I've heard of this before,
Yeah.
but it has nine
strips
pieces,
of leather.
right.
And sometimes they would put bone or metal in the end of them. Oh, it was a
rip you
nasty
open.
beating. Oh, yeah, it would
yeah.
rip a man apart.
Good Lord.
Yeah, other articles, other lines in the articles could vary from ship to ship. I mean, the first man that would spot a ship at sea, if he called out sails and they successfully took the ship, whoever saw it first, he got first choice of any weapon on the ship.
Oh, nice.
They had musicians on the ship. And even in the 1700s, they would attack a ship with a soundtrack. And so the band would play to motivate the crew. And it spelled it out. The musicians will play when the crew shall request. However, they do get the Sabbath off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my favorite. This is in every single set of articles. They had workers' compensation on a pirate ship.
No way.
It's one of the first documented places that had an insurance policy at work. It said, should a man lose a joint during an engagement, he shall receive the sum of 400 pieces of 8. Now, a piece of 8, folks, I got one hanging here somewhere if I can find it. Here it is a 1 ounce silver coin. If a man got 400 of these because he had his finger cut off, maybe got a concussion or broke a leg or something, an injury is most likely going to survive. 400 of these is a nice payday.
Yeah.
But if you lose a limb, it doubles to 800. Now,
Wow.
here's the problem with that. You lose an extremity out at sea,
Yeah.
your chances to live long enough to collect that, see it, or spend it are slim to none. Because most likely you're going to bleed to death,
Yeah.
or this guy's going to die from an infection.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
very few people survive those injuries. Now, I have found a few injury survivors from here and there. Once in a while, I'll come across one.
Yeah.
But in all the years I've been at this stuff, I have never in all my years of research found a single pirate with a hook. I've only found one who actually had a peg leg. This is a French guy way back in the 1500s, and the Spanish called him Old Peg Leg.
Yeah.
How creative.
That's where it came from. That's
Yeah.
where the stories came from.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying there was no such thing as a hook or a peg leg on a ship. I'm just
Yeah.
saying if it's there, nobody knows about it. They
Yeah.
didn't write it down.
Right. Right.
But, Hollywood, well, they make you think every ship had 4 or 5 guys
Oh, yeah.
sporting a shiny hook and 3 or 4 hopping about on the peg leg.
Yeah.
But that's Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of stuff Hollywood's told us never happened. It just didn't happen. I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't make them walk off a plank.
Yeah. I was going to ask
No,
about that. Was
they
that
didn't
even a
have,
real
there's
thing?
no record to be found of a man ever being made to exit a ship off a diving board.
Yeah.
That came straight out of Peter Pan.
Yeah.
They didn't go around the ship all day going arr at each other either. They didn't say that on a pirate ship either.
Their favorite letter is not the letter R.
No.
No.
Nope. That actually came from a British actor in 1952 by the name of Robert Newton. Robert Newton in 1952 was the first man that played Blackbeard in the movie. And he played Long John Silver for Walt Disney in Treasure Island. In the part of England where he comes from, they'll put an R in tuna. That's just how they talk in that part of England.
Really?
Well, they do in Boston, too. I guess a lot of people came from there from Boston,
Yeah.
came over there to Boston. But anyway, so when he was in these movies and TV sets and such, he'd go around, I guess he'd finish off every second sentence in his script by going, arr. Everybody thought, wow, that sounds so cool. How about pirates used to say that? Hey, British, you ought to know. Leave it in. It sounds good. Don't edit that. And it stuck. It stuck.
Interesting.
Oh, it stuck. I tell people every day, if I had $1 for every time somebody has screamed, "Arr!" at me out here on the street, I wouldn't be out here with y'all today. I'd be on a 45-foot catamaran behind a private island someplace. I don't
you
care
go.
if they do. I think it's fun. They're in
Yeah.
the spirit of things. I
Yeah,
always
yeah.
get a kick out of it. I love
Absolutely.
it. But anyway, that's just Hollywood stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, transitioning over to the ghost side of things.
Okay.
Can you give us some ghost pirate stories for Charleston? All right.
Well, there's an old legend that right up Meeting Street here, there's a house on Meeting Street. It is called, the nickname called it the Bosom. Now, legend has it there was a pirate ship that showed up in the harbor out here at some point, and contradicting myself from earlier, the captain came up the creek, and which was back then Vandross Creek, which is where Water Street is today, and buried a treasure in the marsh somewhere up in the vicinity of this house. I believe it's 37 Meeting.
Okay.
I'm kind of flogging my memory here. I think it's 37. Anyway. Well, anyway, they go back to the ship. Well, that evening, the captain is missing a guy. So he came back over to check on it and found him trying to dig up the treasure. So he dispatched the man.
Yeah.
And left his body to guard the treasure.
Yeah.
And legend has it that his ghost is seen hanging about that house. And in fact, I read a story, I don't know how accurate it is, but I read this a while back about some guy said one of the happiest days in his life. This is back in the 1980s, I believe. He actually bought that house. He said it was the greatest day of my life. I'd always wanted an old historic house, and I bought that house. And he said the happiest day of my life after that was the day I sold it about a year later, because he said he encountered that ghost over 20 times.
Wow.
He said he just had to get out.
Did he say how he encountered it, or he just had to leave?
Kept running into this pirate ghost. So there you go.
Yeah, very interesting.
It's a fun story.
Yeah.
It's I think you can read it. There's several good Charleston ghost story books. It's in one of those.
Okay.
It's actually a picture of the house and the story behind it's in that book.
Okay.
I think it's Haunted Harbor. I think it's the name of the book, The Haunted Harbor.
Haunted Harbor. All right.
Yeah.
Any other pirate ghost stories for the Charleston area?
There's a lot of ghost stories, but not that many tied in directly with pirates. Well,
Okay.
I'll say this. Out here underneath this park and over there around some of those real pretty houses are bones of dead pirates because they hanged them right in this area.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And see, when they hanged them, this all was open space. None of what you see around us was here. This was just a wide open space filled with oyster shells, oyster bed, spartina grass, silt, mud. At low tide, it was totally exposed.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why they hanged them down here.
Yeah.
And then when the tide would come in, well, they just cut these bodies down. Well, they left them strung up down here for close to a month after they killed them. And they hanged 51 pirates down here between July the 3rd of 1717 or December 10 of 1718.
Yeah.
And when they would hang them and sun dried them a while, they cut the body down and just leave it laying here. So as the tide would wash in over these bodies tangled up in the marsh grass and in the sea and in the oyster beds, they just got eventually recovered.
Yeah.
So there are bones of dead pirates down here all underneath this park and some of these pretty houses. So I'm sure that's why this area they claim is so haunted with pirate ghosts.
Oh, yeah. People reported seeing them walking around at nighttime.
Yeah. Actually, there was one lady. Her name was Margaret. I don't know what her last name was. But she and her husband were taking a sunset stroll down through here one evening at dusk.
Oh, yeah.
And actually found a guy down the street here. Looked like he was committing suicide, hanging himself, and then they called 911. But they realized when they got the 911 operator that the noose around his neck wasn't attached to anything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they had a hard time explaining that one, I'm sure, to the 911 operator. But anyway, they encountered a hanging ghost.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it is the Halloween time, 2022. Give us some other ghost stories for the Charleston area.
Oh, Lordy, how long you got? your battery may go dead on your gear out here. I mean, this is one of the most haunted cities in the country.
Give us some of the major ones.
Well, let me just give you personal experiences. I'll give you one of my favorite personal experiences. A lot of people talk about Philadelphia Alley being called Dueler's Alley. It's right off, it goes between Cumberland and Queen, a little narrow alleyway. No records I know of any duels in the alley.
Yeah.
The one that most people refer to when they talk about the alley was the duel of Dr. Joseph Brown Ladd when he and Ralph Isaacs had a duel, but most records indicate that duel took place probably somewhere near the College of Charleston, where it is today. But still, that alleyway has some haunts in it, and I've had several great fun experiences in there, but this is one of my favorite. And I think you mentioned you watched some of our video blogs, so this is one that I told on there. I was giving a tour one night. I was helping my friends with Bulldog Tours, and I wrapped up, and I was getting ready to finish, and I had about 5 minutes left on the tour, so I thought I'd have some fun. I had about 20 people with me, and I said, I'll tell you what, instead of knocking off 5 minutes early, let's have some fun. I'll mention a few hotels and bed and breakfast inns around town. If I mention someplace you're staying, if you'll tell me, I'll be more than happy to tell you about where you're going to be spending the night tonight. A little story about where you're going to spend the night. Well, everybody just kind of drew up like that. Well, I started naming a bunch of places. Well, then I mentioned the Embassy Suites Hotel on Meeting Street. And I had a family in front of me. And the lady looked at me and she says, "Oh, Lord, have mercy. That's where we're staying." I said, "Well, then let me tell you a story about where you're going to spend the night tonight."
Yeah.
It was back in September of 2003. There was a cardiologist named Dr. Anna Fletcher who was going to be staying there while attending a conference at the medical university. She had flown over here from Brussels. And so a transatlantic flight, then down to Charleston. I'm sure she was very tired when she got here.
Yeah.
So she checked into the hotel that evening. The conference started the next day. And so she grabbed a quick dinner and got in her room and got ready to go to bed. And when she turned out the light, she said she couldn't see her hand in front of her face. So what she ended up doing was turning on the light in the bathroom and left the door cracked so she'd have some light if she ever had to get up in the middle of the night. Didn't want to break her neck in a strange dark room.
Right.
Well, she got up the next day and went to the conference, and said it was a long day. And by the end of that day, she said, "Man, that jet lag was just kicking me in the pants." So she got up and made it to get something to eat, ran back to the room, checked, got in the room, took off her clothes, got ready for bed, crawled in, went sound asleep. Well, she said around 3 in the morning, she just kind of roused it up a little bit. She rolled over to try to go back to sleep. But she said as I was rolling over, she said she caught some movement out of the corner of her eye just off the foot of the bed. So she said she rolled back about half asleep, looking off the end of her bed, and suddenly, she said a guy stepped right up to the foot of the bed, wearing a gray uniform. There's a man standing at the foot of my bed at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, she sat straight up at that point.
Oh, yeah.
She's wide awake now. And she said the guy's lips were moving. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but his lips were moving. But then she said he kind of leaned over to get a better look at her, and when he leaned over, now all this light from the bathroom has totally illuminated his whole upper body, and that's when she realized that this fellow was not alive because half his head was missing.
Oh, my
It's
goodness.
like something blown half this man's head off.
Yeah.
So she screamed and ran for the door. She said he jumped between me and the door and I ran right through him. So she makes it down to the lobby screaming for help. And some guy comes out and said, "All I could tell this guy is I'm not staying in this place. You're going to get me out of here now because there's something in that room. Please get me out of here." So he and some of the night staff went up there, and I stood outside the door. She said, "I'm looking around in there." And they're just looking and said, "Man, there's nothing here." She said, "I don't care what you do not see now. I know what I did see earlier." So they packed what few things she had unpacked, put it in her luggage and brought it to her, took her across the street and put her in a nice room at the Francis Marion Hotel. They just didn't bother to tell her it was haunted too, though. But anyway, she said, "I spent the rest of my night sitting up in that room with all the lights on, terrified I was going to see this man again." Well, I looked at that family and I said, "I hope y'all have a lovely evening there tonight." That woman said, "We out of there in the morning." I said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to chase you out of your hotel." And her husband laughed and said, "No, we're going home in the morning. We've been there all week. Our vacation's over." I said, "You ought to be all right for one more night." I had to hose them down. Anyway, well, so the next night, that was on a Saturday night. I walked into the Bulldog office on Sunday night. And when I walked in, we had a nice lady working with us back then. Her name was Tracy. And she saw me come in and she said, "Oh, good, you're here." She handed me a piece of paper and said, "There's this phone number. Please call this guy. He was all excited. He was on your tour last night." So I go in the office and dialed this number. And the guy answered the phone. I told him, "This is Eric Lavender." I said, "I understand you want me to call you. You were on my tour last night." And he said, "Man, I'm glad you called." He said, "We were the family with you last night staying at the Embassy Suites Hotel." I said, "Well, please tell me something didn't chase y'all out of that room." He said, "Oh, no. We had a wonderful time. We can't wait to come back." But he said, "Man, we did have something weird happen and we had to call and tell you." He said, "Got up this morning before daylight, packed our car, been driving all day." He explained to me in an email the next day with everything I'm telling you. They lived in a town in Tennessee. Basically, if you drew a straight line between Chattanooga and Nashville, about halfway in between is where they live. He said, "We walked in the house a while ago, dropped our luggage, long day, decided we'll just rest a bit. Let's fix us something to drink and just rest a bit." So I'm fixing me and my wife some ice water. Kids are getting something to drink out of the fridge. And I noticed I had one message on our answering machine. So I figured I'd see who called while we were away. And I hit the play button and went back to fixing the water. The message started playing. And he said, "We froze in our tracks. We couldn't believe what we were hearing. I'm staring at this answering machine. It freaked out the kids so bad she ran to the room. My wife dumped her water and poured herself a stiff drink to calm her nerves. He said, you got to hear this message. Well, now I'm kind of intrigued. He said, you might not believe this. I said, I don't know, try me. So he laid the answering machine by the phone, or the phone by the answering machine, I should say, hit the play button, and this is what came over the phone. Anybody here staying at the Embassy Suites on Meeting Street? Oh, Lord have mercy, that's where we're staying. Good, ma'am. Let me tell you a story about where you're going to spend the night tonight. In September 2003, there's a world-famous cardiologist. Her name is Dr. And my voice on his answer machine the night before telling them the story of their hotel. Now, after this played for a few seconds, he picked up the phone and said, what do you think about that? I said, I don't know. How'd that happen?
Yeah.
He said, that's what's got us freaked out. He said, last night you made an announcement at the beginning of your tour, which I used to do. This was a long time ago, before we had the really cool fancy phones we've got today.
Mm-hmm.
You said, folks, if you got your little flippy phone with you, flip it out, flip it open, and flip it off. So if you don't mind turning your phones off, I'll remind each and every one of you to turn your telephones back on at the end of this tour. And that way, if it rings during the tour, if your phone's on, it might interrupt the tour. He said, I pulled out my phone and turned it off. These people are standing right in front of me, and there's a big street light right over my head in that alleyway. I can see everybody in front of me, and not a single person had a phone in their hand, especially him. But either way, the story I told them, their hotel was on their answer machine over 350 miles away from that alleyway the night before, where I told them that story.
With your voice?
With my voice. It was me giving them their story.
What in the world? What's the theory? You guys have any? Don't know. Just happened.
That alley's haunted.
That's crazy. That's insane.
That's
is creepy.
That's a true story. That is a true story. He sent me an email the next day.
Yeah.
Sounds like maybe the ghost or something followed him or something. Huh?
Ghost is following him.
Or yeah, I don't know.
Mr. Eric's got a couple souls following him around.
You never know about these things. How do you know?
What other kind of experiences have you had?
Lord. I did tours in the old district jail for them for 12, 13 years. I don't know, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Had a lot of crazy things happen in there. Probably the funniest one, though. The ghost used to mess with me. And people used to lose things. And we go back and find it in the part of the jail we never even went in.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it was kind of crazy.
Interesting.
Well, we had a guy that worked with us for a while and named Jason. Jason works in one of the jewelry stores up here on King Street. And so one night we were giving tours. Jason was our greeter. On a given night, back in the day when the jail was in operation and we're doing tours in there, which hopefully they'll be doing again in January when they get all this renovation work done on the building. It's a great tour, folks. Go to Bulldog Tours. You'll love it, I promise you. Jason would greet all these people and check them in. Because, I mean, several hundred people a night would go through that jail.
Yeah.
So he would check them in and then line them up. And okay, here's your group. I've got them checked in. Well, I could tell after doing a couple of tours that evening, I did a 7, 8, and a 9, and a 10. They were 45-minute long tours. Well, when I got ready to start my 9 o'clock tour, I still had 2 more tours to go. I could tell something was irritating Jason. I said, buddy, what's wrong? He said, I can't find my car keys. I said, okay. I said, well, I saw where you changed clothes back in the back room there. And I said, are you sure they're not in your pants pocket or anything, maybe your jacket pocket? He said, no, I looked. I can't find them. I said, maybe they're in your shoes. I go check inside of your shoes. He said, well, I'm going to look around some more. And so I finished that 9 o'clock. And before I started my 10 o'clock tour, I looked down and said, well, you find them? No. I can't find my keys anywhere.
Yeah.
I said, well, you got here, didn't you? He said, yeah, my car's right over there. I said, I'll tell you what. If you want to, wait around, because once he checks everybody in on the last tour, he can go home. He doesn't need to hang around. I said, just stick around after the tour. If you want to, just tag along with me. I don't care. And after the tour's over, I'll boost you home. He said he had a spare set of keys at home. I said, I'll take you home. I'll even bring you back if you want to come get your car. He said, no, that's too much trouble. He said, I got a spare set at home, and I'll just get a ride share to take me home if I can't find them. I said, well, I tell you what, I got a big Mambo flashlight that I used to use in that jail. I said, I'll look around on the inside of your car with the flashlight and look under your car. Maybe you dropped them out there and they got kicked under your car.
Yeah.
I'll look, and if I find them, I'll call you.
Yeah.
He said, all right, okay. So I came out after I started that tour, and I came out. Well, there sat his car. So he didn't find his keys, so I guess he got the ride share home. Well, now I'm in the parking lot by myself. I've already locked up the jail, ready to go home. So I'm walking across the gravel lot. I reach into my pocket and get out my car keys, and then I drop my flashlight into my pocket. Well, when I put my flashlight in my pocket, it didn't go all the way down. So I said, wait a minute. So I reached in there and pulled out the flashlight and reached back into my pocket. I found his car keys.
What?
They were in my pocket.
Someone
I didn't
put 'em
pick up
there.
this man's car keys.
Someone put them there. You're their favorite person. They're like, we're going to slip them in your pocket.
They dropped them in my pocket. They picked them
Interesting.
up and slipped them into my pocket.
Yeah.
That's
What's
weird.
your what's your theory on like how ghosts are? Some people say it's trapped energy.
That's
Some people
basically
say
what it is. I say it's just
Yeah.
trapped up energy.
yeah.
These, the laws of physics, if
Yeah.
you will. Energy is not, you can't destroy energy.
Yeah.
I figure when somebody dies, their soul is going someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Some up, some down, whatever.
Yeah.
But I believe that energy that was within that individual, that energy still is around, and it manifests itself sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've come across things in my day of doing this stuff that
Yeah.
I can't explain.
Yeah.
I cannot explain it.
Oh yeah.
And I was 10 years old when I saw my first ghost. I'm 67. And I mean, back when I was growing up and the kid, people say, my buddies, I'm reading this comic book. I'm reading this comic book. What comic book you reading, Eric? I said, I ain't reading comic books. I'm reading ghost story books. I mean, I was hooked. I mean, when I was 10, I saw the Brown Mountain Lights outside of Morganton, North Carolina. I was hooked.
Yeah.
And so I said, this is fabulous stuff. I loved it, you
Yeah.
know. And I'm a God-fearing man. I mean, I'm an ordained deacon in the Baptist church. I'm an ordained elder in the Presbyterian church. I was telling somebody, well, if they ever make me a Catholic, I guess I can be an altar boy. But anyway, but seriously, I firmly I'm a very devout individual, but I've just come across things I can't explain.
Right.
I cannot explain them.
When you see these ghosts, or the ones that you've seen, I've talked to people that I've worked with in the past that have said that they've seen ghosts as well. Like this one guy I used to work with, he said they worked at this denim factory that used to be on Confederate battleground, and
Yeah.
he used to see Confederate soldiers walking around. He said,
Yeah.
but they don't look like that blue thing that you see in the movie. He said they look like real people.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
And that's what you've seen?
Yeah. Mhm.
Real people?
Yeah.
Or they look like real people. But
Yeah, they do. They look like real people.
Mm.
And it's crazy. But they take different shapes and forms. Sometimes it might be a mist, which
Yeah.
is what they call an ectoplasm.
Mm-hmm.
You might see a little round spot of light. They call those orbs.
Yeah.
I mean, they take different shapes and different forms. But yeah, I've seen full-blown apparitions.
Mm-hmm.
Got photographs of them that people have given me. They've been
Wow.
on tours before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And I
crazy.
share a lot of those pictures with people whenever I do a night tour.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm doing a pirate and ghost tour at night, I'll
Yeah.
share some of those pictures with them.
Yeah.
Mhm. And the ghosts that you have seen, none of them have not physically, but interacted with you. They act like
No.
you're not there.
No,
Or they
I'm
act
just,
like they're stuck in a
I'm
loop.
just, well, yeah, they're there. I mean,
Yeah, they're just.
some ghosts will interact, and some hauntings are just, they're just there. I mean, they don't
Yeah.
even know, or I don't know if they're aware of what's around them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm
They're
saying.
trapped in their own that little bit of energy is trapped where they came from, and then other ones are kind of in the moment with you.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've heard of people that have had both types of experiences.
Mhm.
Yeah, like the stories you hear
Yeah.
of like Confederate soldiers marching or Indians walking through an area
Oh,
that
yeah.
would be like energy trapped, just moving.
Yeah.
But then
yeah.
you have the ghosts that seemed
Yeah.
like the one with the lady in the hotel.
Yeah.
He's leaning over her.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
he's
that's
doing
like
more
an
than that.
interaction to me.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege to have worked with a lot of those people on these TV shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've actually appeared on Ghost Hunters.
Okay.
I've been on Ghost Adventures.
You've been on Ghost Adventures.
Yeah, and
Oh,
I've been
wow.
on Paranormal State. It was an old one many years ago.
Really?
Yeah, that was the first one I ever did, and had a fun time in the jail with those people. And
What was that like? Just sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No.
you. With the Ghost Adventure guys, me and my girlfriend watch their show
Yeah.
consistently. But like Zach and all
Yeah.
their,
Mhm.
how was that experience just hanging out with
it
them?
was interesting. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was interesting. But a lot of what you do with these guys, you're not the main focus.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I spent I did a 45-minute interview with the guys with Ghost Hunters,
Yeah.
and my part of the show was maybe 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I just hit the edit room floor, which is fine. I don't care.
Yeah.
Now, I actually gave Zach and his guys a walk around. I took them around the
awesome.
perimeter of the building and showed them some things. Probably the most interesting experience, though, out of all of that was when Ryan Burrell, who was the guy from from Paranormal State.
Yeah.
And we did his show in July. I want to say it was 2011 when we did the show, maybe 2010, 2011, somewhere in that frame. We filmed in July, and they aired the show in September.
Okay.
Well, after that, it was the first time that the old jail had ever been shown on a national show, and so Ryan wanted to come back and bring somebody with him, and so John asked me to meet up with them at the jail and let them see the jail and take them through if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And first I thought he brought his mother with him, but it turned out to be Lorraine Warren. And I mean, I thought I was geeking out. He brought her, man. I was just going, I can't believe she's here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd followed this woman for years, going all the way back to the old movie, The Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
Because she and her husband Ed were the investigators in that case, and now I'm getting to show her this jail.
Yeah.
She wouldn't let me stay in the jail. After about 30 minutes, she dragged me out.
Really?
She wouldn't stay in there. She said, we can't stay in this business. She was having a fit.
Oh, yeah.
She was seeing and hearing all kinds of stuff in there. She
dang.
wouldn't let me stay in there. We had to take her out.
Really?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're interacting with all these different types of, TV personalities or whatever, you have all those people that watch it and be like, oh, that stuff's all made up, blah, blah, blah. What is your take on, like, interacting with those
here's
people?
the thing.
Are they flubbing the,
I can't really say for sure, because when they do the actual investigation portion,
You're not there.
I'm not there.
Yeah.
I'm not there.
Yeah.
I was sort of the prelude.
Right.
I was the introduction.
Yeah.
And another guy helped us out on that particular show with the Ghost Adventure guys, a guy named Hoon. Yeah, we call him Hoon. He's a great guy, fun guy. And so we just Hoon walked them in the jail. I took them around the perimeter of the jail and showed them some things. And then that was at the beginning of the show. But when they go in, they're on their own. We're not there. I wasn't there with them on any of these shows, any of them.
Yeah. Cool.
Quick question, not directly in Charleston, but the legend of the Somerville Light. You familiar with that legend?
Yeah, I've actually got a buddy of mine, Bruce Orr, who's written a lot of good ghost story books local. He's a local guy, lives in Moncks Corner.
Okay.
Tour guide as well, and a very talented individual. And he's actually experienced it.
Oh, really? Can you give us the gist of tell us the legend?
I don't want to steal his thunder. All I'll say is this: he told me he was actually in law enforcement. He was actually with the sheriff's department, and he said he got so scared he lost his badge out there in the dark.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I mean it freaked him out. You just have to round up Bruce sometime. He's got
to get the
contact from you.
Yeah, Bruce Orr is a fantastic guy. He can tell you some great stories.
The legend, the way I know it, just for the listener who doesn't know, is there was an old road in Somerville, which now there's a neighborhood there.
Yeah, there's a neighborhood there.
But there's
Sheep
an
Island
old
road.
Right, there's an old road, and if you went to the end of that road and kept going, you would eventually hit an area where there would be a light.
Yeah.
And it would move in your direction.
Yeah.
And then it would come over to your vehicle would shut off.
Yeah.
And basically some other stuff might happen, but
yeah.
The legend is that light is from a lady who was out searching for her husband, who was a train conductor, correct?
He was on a train, it wrecked or fell off or whatever. He fell off the train or But yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll have to get Bruce sometime on your podcast.
What about Strawberry Chapel?
That was going to be my next one.
I don't know anything about Strawberry Chapel,
really?
but I bet he does.
Okay.
I would bet he does.
We'll definitely have to talk to him.
Yeah,
Strawberry Chapel's another one of those places,
And Bruce wrote probably the best book that's ever written about the legend of Lavinia Fisher. The lady who haunts the jail.
Oh, okay.
Everybody claims that she was a female serial killer. Well, I mean, he went back and pulled the court records. They didn't kill him. She didn't kill anybody. Now she was just, he and her husband ran a place outside of town called the 6 Mile Wayfarers Inn, which basically is located in the vicinity where the old Navy Hospital is on Rivers Avenue.
Oh, okay.
And they were people being beaten up and robbed on the road called highway robbery, and that's what they were eventually arrested and charged with, of running a gang of people that were robbing travelers up and down that road.
Oh, wow.
And that's what they were hanged for. Man, her ghost used to follow me around in that old jail.
Oh, really?
I got a lot of pictures of her. People used to take.
So of all the
really?
places that you give tours and stuff at down here, you'd say the jail is probably the most
definitely.
active?
Jail is probably the most active and haunted building.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing renovations on it now that was purchased, and they're going to be converting a lot of the jail into office and event space.
You think that's gonna the ghosts are gonna have fun in there?
The ghosts will have a good time.
One of these mornings, they all going to come into work, and their desks are all going to be stacked on top of each other. But that'll be an interesting time. They're going to preserve a section of the jail in its original state, just kind of clean it up and make it look nice. But basically leaving it as what it would have been when prisoners were held there. And and they're going to be conducting tours through that portion of the jail and whatever else are available on the perimeter and outside of the building. So hopefully they're going to get that ramp back up sometime after the first of the year.
What's your thought on that? On older pieces, historic pieces of Charleston, like the jail getting flipped into offices? Is that just kind of rub you wrong, or is it is what it is?
Well, it is what it is. I mean, every property signage in Charleston over 75 years old is protected. Okay. If you buy an old house that was built 250 years ago, 300 years ago. Well, folks, when they built that house, there was no such thing as indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
There's no heating and air. There's nothing like that in there. So you can retrofit a house with electricity and all this stuff, but the outer facade has to remain. I mean, you can clean it up, but they're going to have to approve what you're going to do with it, so it maintains its historic character. You can make it livable and modernize it inside. Yeah. But you got to make sure that the outside stays the same. I tell people all the time, I'm 7 years away from being a protected property in Charleston, but that's preservation and the best they can do. But as long as it maintains itself on the outside, I can't really say about what somebody can do with their property. Yeah. And there's heavily regulated and restrictions are placed on things, but I think they're doing it okay. I mean, there was a while when people used to have these bumper stickers on their cars around here that said "gut fish, not houses." But if you got a house like that, you can't live in it. I mean, if there's no electricity, how are you going to live in the house? I mean, there's no way you can do that. You got to fix it up and do a few things to it in order to make it habitable. But I've got mixed emotions about what they did with the jail. I mean, they had to do something. The old building was in terrible shape. It was going to fall in on itself if somebody didn't do something. And just to get a private company to do it like they're doing, it's probably the best way you can do it. Because the city cannot afford to go out and buy every old building in this town and fix it up. I mean, it's impossible. There's not enough money printed to be able to do that. And that's a great example of it right there. It would be nice if it could have been done, but it would have cost a bucket load of money to fix that building up and make it to where you have to remember, when that building was being used as a jail, there's no indoor plumbing, there's no running water, heating, air. The only thing they had for bathrooms were buckets, and the only thing that was covering the windows were bars. I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, there was no modern conveniences in that building. Right. They put in a bathroom later on when it was used for different things. It was a daycare used at that building one time, and I think they used it for, I think some of the city police used it as a detective's office for a brief period of time. I've heard that. So, I mean, but other than that, I mean, well, it was also the home of the College of the Building Arts that learned how to do renovations on historic property, but they moved over to the old trolley sheds over on Meeting Street. They redid those buildings for them. So there you go.
Well, one last question for you before we get your info for anyone wanting to reach out to you. What's your experience with the downtown Charleston guineas? Charleston guinea flock.
Well, we see them every once in a while. I'm looking. I don't see them today, but they live somewhere in this neighborhood. I'm not sure where.
They hang out down here a lot. The Battery.
They hang out in this park a lot. They hang out in this park. I see them down here a lot.
And you're a fan of the guineas. I know you recommended them to a couple people.
Oh yeah, guineas are cool. Yeah, I've seen guineas as long as I've been around. Growing up, there was a family that lived behind me when I was a little bitty kid. I mean, just a little tiny kid. They had a flock of guineas in the yard.
Oh, nice.
Oh, I've seen guineas.
Do you know where the guineas down here even came from? Someone bring them down here one time?
Well, they actually live. Somebody owns them. They're not they're not free range guineas. I mean, somebody actually has them.
I didn't know someone
had. Well, they are sort of free range. They wander about. Right. But yeah, there's a lady somewhere down here that owns them. I don't even know which street she's on. But
I need to get her info. I like to talk to her.
Down here in this vicinity, down in this neck of the woods. I'm sure maybe somebody will see her here this and knows who
Yeah.
it is.
Very
And
interesting.
They can hook you up with them.
All right. Well, Mr. Eric, thank you very much. How do people get a hold of you? What's the name of your company?
It's called Charleston Pirate Tours.
Okay.
And if you are looking for a birthday party or something, we have Island Paradise Balloon Art and Magic. Yeah, I've been doing magic tricks since I was 10 years old.
Oh, that's cool.
And do balloon art, hats, animals, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the phone number for either is the same. It's 843-442-7299. And we have a website. It's charlestonpiratetour.com. And then we also have another one, islandparadiseballoonart.com. Those are our two websites.
And on your Pirate Tour website, you do have the Captain's Vlog, which I think is also on YouTube.
Yep, Captain's Vlog is what we did during the pandemic months.
Mm-hmm.
It was Charleston's 350th birthday. We had planned on doing these anyway. We were figuring doing maybe one a week, and then when they shut everything down here for 90 days, we were turning out 4 or 5 a week.
Yeah.
So if you go to our website, charlestonpiratetour.com, you will find a drop-down menu, and you'll see Captain's Vlog. And there's probably 60 plus, give or take, these videos. They're little small vignettes about Charleston history, some ghost stories, some history. Even have bloopers, folks.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep,
indeed. We have bloopers on there. Yeah, we had some times out here. If you can't laugh at yourself, I'm telling you, you got troubles. That's all I'll say.
Yes,
but we
sir.
had some fun out here doing those.
All right.
We think we might ramp them up maybe next year because
Okay.
there's a lot we still haven't covered. Some a little further out than just particular downtown.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well,
All
thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Eric, for coming out and meeting us here. Very much appreciate it.
Hey, I was happy to do
Thank
it.
you for the knowledge, too.
Oh, I'm happy to
So,
do it. Look,
yes,
I look forward to seeing anybody that wants to come out. Y'all take it easy, guys. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. And
All right,
until
God
next
bless,
time.
folks. God bless. Thank y'all very much.
Yes, sir. Out.